What if Mega Aerodactyl was in Gen 1 OU? One of the first videos I ever made for What If videos was Mega Aerodactyl in Gen 1. And for that one, I used the standard Aerodactyl move pool that it had in Generation 1. Because that's what I thought was interesting. Here's a Pokemon with an abysmal move pool. What happens if we buff its stats a little bit? Is the extra buff enough to make it viable? It was kind of hard to say when it came to a regular Arrow. I'm not too sure. But that's besides the point, because we're now revisiting it with one major difference. We are using National Dex move pools, which, yeah, like, that is a big deal for someone like Mega Aerodactyl, who didn't even get Earthquake in base RBY. But now look at this monstrosity. You have just absolutely insane stats, but now you just have good coverage as well. Now, Quake Slide, that is already just... Arrow just wants that so much. It really hated not having Rock Stab in Generation 1. But as embarrassing as it may sound, I think it hated not having Earthquake even more. It is just one of those coverage moves that you just desperately needed. But now it has those. And with Rock Slide and Earthquake, not a single thing in this format resists. That's already pretty good. Add in Hyper Beam, you know, just a pretty good move, especially when you have just a phenomenal crit rate. But then the last move can change. I have Fire Blast here for two reasons. One, 70 special, the exact same as Tauros. So with Fire Blast, that just overall does pretty decent damage to Executor. It's like the only real reason you can 1v1 Executor. But despite that, I actually might argue that Agility is better. Because the only real threat to Arrow, outside of crits, and I'm sure you can count crits as a weakness, the real weakness will be Thunder Wave. Slowing this thing down so that other mons like Starmie can make a comeback. So being able to go for Agility, so that you're back to being the fastest thing in the tier again, I think that's honestly worth it. But it really does depend on just what your team is. I would say Agility, I'd argue, is more consistent. Because with Fire Blast, not only are there chances of getting special drops, but more importantly, there's chances of you missing Fire Blast, which I don't really like. To be honest, I don't like Rock Slide's accuracy either. I'd personally recommend, if you are using Arrow, to use Earthquake as your main attacking move. I'm pretty sure both do roughly about the same amount of damage. But even if, like, Rock Slide does a little bit more, it's not a big amount, so it doesn't matter. Because I'd argue for Mega Arrow, you're just kind of fishing for crits anyways. And at that point, I don't think it matters if it's Earthquake or Rock Slide. But that's just my 2 cents. You do you. Now let's start with talking about its typing before going over its moves. Now Rock Flying is a pretty interesting type. I think some people think it's like super good. And some people think that if Aerodactyl just had Stab, it would automatically be OU. Which isn't exactly true. My friend Verscato plays a format called Kanto Plus. And in that format, I know for a fact Aerodactyl has Rock Slide and Earthquake, and it possibly might have Dual Wing B, although that might just be Dragonite. Either way, despite actually having coverage, it just wasn't enough to be, like, super good in OU. I know for a fact it did drop the Underuse, but I think now it's just like a C tier in that metagame. So, like, obviously usable, but it's not automatically good because, honestly, just because of that flying typing. They do kind of work well together in some ways. You do have that very viable normal resistance, and you have a ground immunity instead of a resistance. But then you're weak to both Thunderbolt and Blizzard, which is really not good and pretty exploitable. It doesn't help that you're a physical attacker and there's Slowbro, so there's also Surf you gotta worry about. Granted, you are Mega Aerodactyl, so critting twice in a row is a possibility. But do you want to risk it? Because Swirlball is also definitely going for Thunder Wave, which can just make it even worse for you. That's with regular Aerodactyl as well, when it comes to, like, just the flaws of the typing. Those definitely still apply here, but it's nowhere near as bad. Because for starters, sure, you're weak to Thunderbolt, but now you outspeed Jolteon instead of like speed tying with it. And while both you and Zapdos have the ability to OHKO each other with crits, you have a much better chance of critting. So, does Zapdos risk it? I'm not sure. And with more attack, you also do better against Rhydon. I forgot to mention the Rhydon matchup. Earthquake allows you a 3-hit KO. It, obviously, with a crit, it's a 2-hit KO. Pretty sure Rock Slide's still a 2-hit KO back, but you now have a much better chance of taking that on. So, overall, that's just pretty good. And then with these moves, and with those stats, like 150 speed, you're faster than Electrode. Because Electrode doesn't get 150 speed until Gen 7. You have the best crit rate in the game, you outspeed literally everything. This thing is a monster of a revenge killer. And with 135 attack, it is hitting everything for pretty decent damage. The only thing that doesn't care too much would be probably Executor if you're not using Fire Blast. But even then, Rock Slide's still doing decent damage, and obviously a critical Rock Slide, it's 2-hit KOing Executor. So there's really nothing that wants to deal with this thing. Blizzards and stuff are still going to be there, and Aerodactyls will be being KO'd, so it's not like this thing would beat Tauros, that's the best Pokemon in the tier. But I do think it's very unhealthy and very scummy. I honestly am leaning towards this thing getting banned. And in Ubers, honestly, it's even better than Ubers because you're faster than Mewtwo. Although, like, with Mewtwo, it's definitely bulky, and with Ice Beam, it can definitely KO Aerodactyl. But overall, like, I'm interested to see how that would go for that metagame. But for now, let's get into the replays, shall we? Definitely, you can definitely tell there's a big difference between this and just using Double Edge as your main attacking move. But despite that, some Pokemon like Tauros still hit pretty hard. But luckily, with your special defense boost, you can actually survive a crit. I forgot to mention it, but with my original video, I thought Mega Aerodactyl was only using 70 special, like Tauros. It's using that for the special attack, but I'm pretty sure it's still using the special defense. Which means it will be using 95 special defense, which is really, really good. That's a great special to have, and definitely helps you tank some moves that regular Aerodactyl probably wouldn't. And that crit rate helps you win fights that regular Aerodactyl probably wouldn't. Reflect Wax, okay, technically you could crit, but critical hits from Aerodactyl are just not hitting as hard as the Mega. That part should be obvious. So, I feel like this is definitely a match that is only really a critical either way with the Mega. If I had to guess, while you could theoretically get like 2 or 3 crits in a row with regular Aerodactyl, it's just not good enough. Also, for this Snorlax set, it's Reflect, Rest, Body Slam, Ice Beam. If it was just a physical X set, obviously regular and normal Aero just absolutely stomp. But also look there. Look at how much Ice Beam did. That only did 32%. That is 110% because of the 95 special defense. And you can see right there how much of a big deal that is. Where Ice Beam's only a 3-hit KO. Which is, yeah, that's great. That is really great. Now, Amnesia Wax, honestly, I thought this was going to be pretty bad, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be. Obviously, you still have a chance to do crits. Though, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure a critical like Earthquake isn't a guarantee to a KO. Look at that. Even with one Amnesia boost, you can kill Arrow. Or not kill Arrow, I mean, with one Amnesia boost, it's not enough to kill Arrow. That means that I think you can reliably 3-hit KO Snorlax. At the very least, I don't think it comfortably sets up Amnesia in front of you. Obviously, if it's already set up, you don't take Aerodactyl out. But at that point, you're just taking whatever you have available and just going boom. But to be fair, if your Gengar Executor goes boom, Aerodactyl immediately afterwards, Hyper Beam, that seems pretty good. It has 135 attack. It hits pretty hard. Now, unfortunately, even with the good attack, you're still only 3-hit KOing Chansey. Obviously, Hyper Beam is a 2-hit KO, and a 1-hit KO with a crit. But I'm not too sure if you risk it. But on the bright side, because of that special defense boost, you actually are only 3 hit KO'd by Ice Beam, which definitely means this could potentially be in your favor. Although Chansey getting a crit and not Aerodactyl is hilarious, but I wouldn't bet my money on that. Next up, we have Alakazam. He used to be one of the fastest mons, and technically still is. But when something like Aero is faster and can 3-hit KO you, it can technically go to 50%, but it's not like... It's just not in the ranges. I wouldn't... It's probably not happening. But on the bright side, look at that Psychic. You tank that easily. So you go for a Agility, and Zam just kind of dies to you. It's honestly pretty cool. Next up is Cloyster. With Rock Slide, this is definitely a quick go either way. I do not know how much it relies on the crit, though. I think it probably relies on the crit just about as much as you hope you get a lot of turns to Clamp. And I would imagine Clamp is better than Blizzard, because if Clamp hits, like, let's say, like 4 or 5 times, you only need to hit Aerodactyl once and only have to risk 1 Rock Slide. Meanwhile, I'm sure 2 Blizzards hit, but that's risking 2 crits from Rock Slide. Which I don't know. I don't know if you want to gamble with those cards or not. Maybe. For this replay, for Executor here, we're using just Fire Blast instead of Agility. And maybe you can argue this being a bad matchup without Fire Blast. But at the same time, like, you're not taking Executor, or you're not taking Aerodactyl out when they can still put something to sleep. You're most likely doing it when, you know, something's not asleep. Or when something is asleep. I cannot talk today, I'm sorry. When Sleep Clause is active, that's when you're having Aerodactyl out. And even then, you're not doing a 1v1 replay like this. You're more likely just taking Aerodactyl out when Executor is low. So, in actual context, it would still be a pretty good matchup, because you're obviously revenge killing with Aerodactyl, and Hyper Beam and Rock Slide. There's a lot of ranges where those moves can just kill straight up. But for 1v1s, like, it's... Honestly, now that I've looked at the replay again, I now don't really see any real reason to use Fire Blast. Just use the rest of your team to wear down Eggy. It's a lot easier. But here's Gengar. Thunderbolt, I doubt. Honestly, there's a decent chance, because of your 95 special defense, that you could even survive a critical Thunderbolt. But the same can definitely not be said when it comes to Earthquake. So I'm counting this as a good matchup, even though Gengar has super effective coverage. So, go be the same thing here. And luckily, you can actually survive a Jolteon Thunderbolt. I'm pretty sure that's not the case for a regular Jolteon, because you're using 60 special instead of 95 special defense. Which, yeah, what is that? Like 35 extra points? That definitely is a big deal. And here's Jinx, where you just flat out Oko. I'm not actually sure if the regular Aerodactyl Okos or not. But either way, it's definitely good, and you definitely don't consider Aerodactyl as an anti-lead, but it's nice to know that you can kill Jinx at any time. You wish the same thing for Rhydon, and to be fair, you are kind of close to getting that 2 KO. It's a good go either way. That really depends on if you get a crit or not. And just like Chansey getting a crit, Aero not getting a crit, but Rhydon getting the crit, that is just hilarious. Like, replays like this are so funny. You gotta love Gen 1 sometimes. Now here's Slowbro, and I guess Aerodactyl got pissed about Chansey and Rhydon getting crits, so Hero just gets a double crit against Slowbro. But I would not bet your money on that. I would not risk it. I am 100% certain that Amnesia plus Surf just kills. So, like, why would you risk doing a crit? Just switch into your... I'm actually not sure if you use Zapdos on Aerodactyl teams or not. Now here's Starmie. One of the few things that can reliably fight this thing, and that's because of Thunder Wave, Recover, and most importantly, Volt Beam coverage. All 3 of those traits together allow you to do a decent job fighting it. Obviously, Arrow has crits, but if you go for a crit Earthquake at the start, you go for Thunder Wave, and then you can recover off the damage. Aerodactyl could get another crit, but just as likely just hits for regular damage, or is fully paralyzed. So Aerodactyl could potentially crit it out, but I think 9 times out of 10, it's more so going to be in Starmie's favor. Now, for a match where it's not going to be in Starmie's favor, it is definitely Victory Bell over here. Victory Bell, Like, in this replay, it kind of jobs a lot by missing Stun Spore. But even if it did, it doesn't matter too much. Okay, it kind of matters if it also misses Razor Leaf, but yeah, even when it hits, it's not doing that much. AERODACTYL kind of wins very easily. I'm not even sure if you need a Hyper Beam, but like, why not? Last but not least, we have Zapdos, and I made so many replays. Like, I think I made like 6 or 7 in a row, and every single time, it was just a crit in Oko. I just kind of gave up, because with how many times AERODACTYL crit Zapdos, I thought to myself, even if Zapdos theoretically can crit as well, and exactly only one of the replays did Zapdos crit and Oko AERODACTYL. But after I saw Zapdos get Oko'd so many times, it made me realize, yeah, there's truly no situation where you want to risk it. It is heavily in AERODACTYL's favor, so why would you want to deal with that? You wouldn't. You simply wouldn't. So overall, here's the tier list, and I don't really have any changes here, really. Like, I guess you could maybe put Executor in bad matchups, but even then, like, in practice, it wouldn't really be. And Snorlax, I can see an argument for putting Snorlax in good, but even then, even if Ice Beam's only a 3-hit KO, or if Amnesia Wax is only a 2-hit KO, that's still a pretty dangerous move that I wouldn't want to deal with. But that's just my 2 cents. What do you think? Also, should Victory Bell be put in great matchups? Because it doesn't do that much. AERODACTYL can reliably fight it. And also, like, wrap locking up normal resist just doesn't sound like a good idea. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments, though. But until next time, this is Groundback, and I look forward to hearing from you.